You're listening to Crushing Club Marketing, a podcast for progressive club leaders ready to increase their club's revenue. Time for change begins right now. What's the cost of poor communication in clubs? It could be a critical member vote failing. It could be a tarnished reputation in your community, or it could lead to irreparable damage in your club's culture. Your club's ability to control messaging for important matters in and outside the club is paramount to its long-term success. In this episode, we dive into the profound impact of strategic communications with Jackie Singleton and Kristen LaCount from the Country Club outside of Boston. Well, there's an old saying about communication that rings true, which is, in the absence of information, people make up their own story, and it's usually not a good one. For clubs, this could include a multi-million-dollar renovation project. It could be changes in club policies. It could be sensitive membership matters. But how and when club leaders communicate can make or break member support, and even more, it can have a negative impact on the culture of your club. And if you think the rumors that swirl around your club stay at your club, you're wrong. Once the rumor mill gets cranked up, there is a very good chance that your club's dirty laundry is spread all over town. And tell me that doesn't have a negative impact on prospective members, potentially. So in this episode, we are diving into strategic communications with leaders who have learned that getting ahead of the narrative isn't just about sharing information. It's actually about building trust. It's about maintaining transparency and bringing members along on the journey with you. Kristen LaCount, the general manager at the Country Club at Brookline, and Jackie Singleton, the club's director of member and community engagement, have the most robust team I have ever seen at a private club, and their commitment to member communications is supported by a 2.5-person team. We recently talked about club communications and the critical role it plays in the health of all clubs, and this goes well beyond weekly or monthly newsletters. This is really about how to keep members engaged in important matters at your club and make sure the entire membership is informed and aligned with the club's values and priorities. Well, Jackie and Kristen, thanks so much for joining me today.
Thanks for having us.
Yeah, this is a twofer. I mean, how lucky am I to have two such noteworthy and esteemed professionals on this call? So I really do appreciate the time that you're giving to this episode today. So, Jackie, years ago, I can't remember exactly when it was, but we were probably when I first met you, and I thought you were like the membership director. And I think you said you're like the director of communications or something. I'm like, at a club? I mean, I'd never heard of that. And even to this day, I think you are the only club that I've come across in several years that has a communications team. Are you unique in that way at the Country Club?
So yes, I have been doing this a while, too many years to count, which is, I remember that episode well. I remember doing it with you. I couldn't tell you what year that was. I would say that I don't think that we're unique in having the communications position at this point in time. So back then we certainly were. At this point in time, the field has grown so much that there's now a communications summit through CMAA that's a sellout in like a week to 10 days when it gets advertised and has a waiting list. And I've actually heard just even most recently from World Conference that this is an area that a lot of general managers are looking to learn more about. So still up and coming. It takes a while to get anything going in the club business, but it's good. It's here to stay, I think.
Yeah. And Kristen, as far as your conversations, I mean, are you running into other, peers in the industry that operate similarly, or is the Country Club really unique?
I tend to, I know that everyone thinks their clubs are unique, but we're really all similar. We're all dealing with the same challenges, and I definitely benchmark against other clubs that are similar in size and scope. But the number one conversation starter right now, as far as the GM circle is capital planning, and everyone has a major project going on right now, or they're about to, or they just did one. And I think that that's actually where most of the conversations end up leading is into how are you communicating this? Are you doing the drone footage? Do you have a hard copy versus, electronic only? And these are real life things that Jackie and I are working on right now with a upcoming and current multiple projects going on, but we're no different from many clubs across the country. And I do think that conversation about capital work, the natural next question is, how do we get that out to the membership? And there's a million different ways to do that. And spoiler alert, you got to be redundant and do it all. And it's how to stay organized and tighten that up so that it's not overwhelming to the membership either, or the staff, frankly.
Well, that's not too overwhelming. You got to be redundant and do it all, But so I do want to come back to that, because I think there are so many different aspects to it as well, and obviously, disclaimer, it's, for, I think a lot of people, this is a moving target, and you're learning as you go. And with a membership, especially a membership as large as yours at the country club, there are a lot of variables. I mean, anytime you have humans involved, there are going to be issues. But let me just take a step back before we dive into that. At what point did the team or the leadership at the country club realize that this is an important aspect of our management, to have this communications? I mean, obviously, as a host of major championships and things like that, there's a lot that's going on. But do you remember when that happened, Jackie? Did it predate you? I know you've been there for a lot of years.
Well, lucky for you, you have the woman who sat in the seat first on this call, and it's not me. But it does go back now almost 20 years ago, to the 2006, 2007 kind of time frame, where Kristen was actually in the seat first for a 1-year stint and it really started with a website and some really active curlers who were looking for online reservations. So if you think about how the world has changed in the last 19 years, as far as technology, communications, reservations go, you can imagine the evolution's been a ton since then. But that's really how it started, was almost 20 years ago at this point.
Was there a crisis though, or was there something that happened? Was there a moment in time where it was like, oh my gosh, we actually need to kind of get our arms around this?
Yeah. Jackie, I'll take a stab at it. This went back to probably 2000. What was it? You started in 2007 with that role. So it was 2006, actually. This was a 1 year, as David Shag would call it, mission impossible for me. And it truly was that we had a stagnant, someone at some point had created a website, maybe Members First, as an outsourced kind of job, built the whole thing for us. And it truly was the requests it was the curling community, as Jackie just mentioned, that wanted online reservations and be able to sign up for their bonspiels, which is a curling term for a tournament, and be able to do that electronically and not call the front desk to reserve for everything, or not have, at that time, it was volunteer members that were taking paper and pen registrations and hard copy mailings, and we'd have the business office tallying that. It was kind of all over the place. So that was really the driving force. But as a result, I would say that 2006, early 2000s was really a tipping point, I think, for the industry, where you started seeing more electronic newsletters and websites being kind of more active and engaging with the membership. But I had a 12-month mission, and at month 11 said, get me back in operations. And Jackie was born for this. So I went to where I belong, and Jackie has made it an amazing department and part of the club ever since. It's been remarkable to watch just how much, even since, and we'll get to it, but 2020, I would say, was another huge tipping point in the way that a lot of clubs could accept new ways of communicating their membership.
Yeah. And then, Jackie, I mean, what was your background prior to coming to the country club? Where had you,
My background was the country club. So I started at the country club in high school. And thankfully, we have a wonderful training system around here, whereby if you enjoy what you do and you are bought into the culture, you really can keep going. So far anyway. I mean, they haven't kicked me out yet. So I worked in a bunch of different departments here. And I think honestly, that knowledge of working in different operations within the club, front of the house, in the restaurants, in the events, working at the front desk, in the culinary team, working at the pool, like working in all of those various positions gave me enough knowledge of the club and the operations to then be able to communicate about them. And one of the things that I'm still passionate about when I've trained other folks that have come through this department, a lot of them have started part-time in operations. And if they don't, then I really do make sure that they're getting a taste of each operation here at the club so that they understand who they are communicating on behalf of and to those members. And it's not just sitting behind a computer and updating a website and sending out emails. It really has to be more than that.
Almost like from a marketing perspective and marketing communications, it's really understanding that persona, the target audience.
Yes.
And when you work in all those different areas, you really get to know the nuances because they're all a little bit different, those communities, right?
Yes.
Okay, got it. All right. So let's I want to dive into kind of go deeper into the capital project stuff in a second here, but just as a layer of context, what are the various communication channels you are using today, from newsletters to emails to SMS to what are the things that you have in play right now?
Sure. We are primarily based upon our website, email communication, and push notifications for the app. We do use hard copy communication, but on an annual basis, it's really 2 to 3 things a year. The annual report is one of those items, which got a huge overhaul 2 years ago. And I think that's one of the things we're most proud of as far as hard copy communications. The other place that we're seeing hard copy communications, mailers, is with the capital planning. So we'll talk a little bit about that. We have not driven into SMS, and that's really by design. Our communications committee has so far decided just because we can be somewhere and can communicate in certain ways doesn't mean we should be. I know for me personally, I get a lot of text messages from every brand I've ever interacted with, and at some point you need to opt out of those. And if you've got kids in school and various sports, and all of a sudden you could have 100 text messages that you didn't ask for in the day. Your dentist appointments, your hair appointments, is the club supposed to be in that space too? And really kind of waiting on that to see when the communications committee decides to take that forward. There's definitely a time and a place for all of it. It's really just figuring out that balance. So we walk before we run. And so far we have done more with email, I would say, than anything else.
Got it. And then are you segmenting emails based upon interest, or how does that work? Okay.
I think we put that policy back in place in 2013, 2014. Members have the ability to elect on their own profiles what they're receiving. So we send out monthly newsletters based on every interest at the club. So whether it's the golf committee, rackets committee, curling committee, fitness, etc. We also do send out a weekly email that every member does get. They cannot opt out of. But there's probably about 30 things you can opt in and out of, and members are doing that. We get daily emails with updates of what they're doing and what they're not doing. So people are updating their profiles for folks that don't think they are.
Yeah, you train them.
Yes, right. But again, that's since 2013, 2014. So if you're listening to this and haven't done these things yet, that's 10 years worth of training. So it's
Yeah, it's a habit, right?
Yes.
That muscle. Okay, good. Well, let's leave it at that and just kind of segue into this other thing and around. And I think capital projects, using it as a backdrop, is probably appropriate for the types of communication and the urgency and the importance. So, just in a quick nutshell for us, it's this idea that in the absence of information, people make up their own story. And it's usually bad.
Really?
That's the old saying, I think, something like that. Let's maybe talk about the project that you have going on or about to undertake, and even go back to the idea of how do you handle, or how did you handle communication, the idea that this is something we're going to do, this is something, identifying even the needs. Can you just walk through those early stages? Because a lot of times it seems the clubs that I that I am in communication with is often, I heard this, I heard they're going to do this, and it's going to cost this. Like, how do you, on those early stages, how did you handle your current undertaking?
Kristen should start with the governance
I
of
was just gonna
this
say.
project.
Yeah, I think I can outline kind of the structure, and it was bumpy. I think this was so to answer the question, we have one major project going on right now, which is in one of our centralized buildings on the campus that we're adding a kitchen to the basement, and we're moving all the employee facilities over there, such as the locker rooms and the employee dining, like the cafeteria. And it is, as I said, it's a central building on the campus. So that will be somewhat of what we call a catering kitchen, but it means it's going out to every other building on campus that has food and beverage, which is a 7-day-a-week operation at the country club. So it's unique in a sense that we're constantly loading up golf carts or vehicles with food and beverage and bringing that out to multiple places around campus. So the reason why I talk about that project is it's large. It's you're talking a $10 million level project to get this done. And so that's significant to the membership. It required a vote. And that is in preparation so that building actually becomes our temporary clubhouse during an upcoming, for 2026, clubhouse renovation. And which is a much, much larger number than what I just threw out, but we don't know the numbers, so I'm not going to go on the record saying them. But it's relatable to many clubs that are probably going to listen to this and say, this is the type of capital. These numbers are not too dissimilar as you start to talk to folks around the country. We're all in the same neighborhood, which is why this communication seems more critical than ever, in my experience, at least in the industry. But what we did was we knew this was a biggie. It's the biggest project to come up in the club's history so far. And with that, we started to form a committee structure that really made the statement that this is the board has to have the final say in all of this, including some of the programming decisions and other things that will come with that. And in forming the project committee, we were thoughtful about representation from all the right departments and kind of themes, if you will. And one of those was to make sure a person from the communications committee that Jackie works with closely is represented on the project committee. And that kind of makes its way all the way through the board representative, and understanding that this is very much a strategy. And when it comes to things like surveys or the pamphlets or the member meetings, even, which Jackie will dive into details, this individual as a member, and usually someone who does this professionally, has an opportunity to weigh in and help guide some of the discussions, rather than, and we've called this project, what have we learned from the past? We keep this, what did we learn notebook? I say notebook loosely because it's on my computer, but as you go through these various projects in the past that were much smaller, they were still significant at the time for the club. But sometimes I think you had a number of volunteers that were whipping together their portions of a PowerPoint and throwing that into one presentation that the staff would put together, 2 days before. And, now we've got, Jackie's going to talk to you about the sophistication around, the voiceovers and the video and the way we stream out now, and just all of these things that we've developed into, knowing that it's a big investment up front, but it's a worthwhile investment. And you can see it immediately in the results, people's responses on this project. You are giving them, and she'll probably talk about this, but a taste at a time, rather than overwhelming people with the full course menu, if you will, since I'll do a beverage analogy there. But Jackie really could dive into the details from there. But I think having that committee representation is really the key point. You've got to have a voice at the table that understands what Jackie and her team do and why it's important to be thinking about, messaging and what that means to people. Yeah.
And at that stage, Jackie, is that like, going back to this project, is everyone sworn to secrecy going into it, or like, how do you ensure that that message is controlled?
It's still a social experiment, right? We're still in a social environment. So you can do whatever you want around messaging, but people are still going to make up whatever they might think is happening. I would say that we are about 2.5 years into a 3.5-year drip campaign. So it's long, and it's, it can take a toll. And in 2.5 years, people have made up all kinds of numbers and ideas of what a project is. And I'll give the communications committee a lot of credit. In 2023, we were redesigning our website Not yet fully knowing what it was going to look like for the website as it relates to this particular capital project, but we knew we wanted a space on the website reserved for the capital planning and communications. And the communications committee, a little bit tongue in cheek, nicknamed that page of the website the campus conversations. So in other words, a place where the rumor mill is actually happening. Here's where the facts are if you'd like to get them, but it's
Right.
there for the taking. So that page of the website has been maintained as such. So every communication that we've posted about this particular project has a timeline down the bottom. You can go back to it. It's been actually really helpful for new members coming in that have gone back in time and watched some of the videos that we've done. But I think the committee's been very intentional about having 2 meetings per year so that we have 2 informational sessions that you can come in person, you can join via Zoom and live stream it and ask questions. We have all kinds of ways to submit questions during the meeting. And then we also do record them and then email them out. So we're seeing on average about 400 people sort of participate live, whether in person or on video. And then we do email it out to the full membership after that. So people still are going to make up what they want to make up, but it is out there for consumption. And I think the committee has also been intentional even in the membership information meetings. They used to just be called a member meeting.
Mhm.
And this time around, we've called them member information 1, member information session 2, member information session 3, so that like we have member information session 4 coming up. If it's nicknamed 4, like, there were 3 that preceded it. So there is a lot of information out there, and really kind of going through the year at a time and saying, what are our key messages? When are those going to hit? And where are we going to fill in the gaps, and using multimedia between that.
Yeah. Interesting. So, you, by providing that information, it's sort of almost like a blog type content, right? That's streaming. I can go back and I can look to see other posts or messages or videos about over time. And I'm assuming from what you're saying, if I miss 1, 2, and 3, I can go back and I can watch those meetings as well somewhere and
You
tune
sure
in.
can. And I think that Kristen hit the nail on the head. No matter what project you do, even this one, we're going to look back and say, here's what we learned from it eventually. So I think we've really tried to incorporate from some of the most recent projects. Even at the beginning of this project, there were a lot of areas that, like Kristen was mentioning, a kitchen, like most members aren't stepping into the kitchen. So one of the ideas this time around was to provide for member tours that they could sign up for, take a 90-minute tour with the general manager and our facilities director and go through all the back end of the nooks and crannies that you're not normally going to see,
Yeah.
and leave there. And most people who took that tour, again, in the hundreds, took the tour and said, wow, why aren't we doing this tomorrow? So it was worthwhile to do some of these things that we did learn from, and then taking that, and we have non-resident members or people who may not be able to get up and down the stairs, and doing a fly through of the entire area, and then having Kristen and our facilities director narrate that video so that it's a 30-minute video that if you want to watch it from home, you can. So trying to really serve up each thing in multifaceted ways.
So, just so you said you're 2.5 years into a 3.5 year
communications plan. Then the project actually starts, hopefully.
Okay, and the vote, there's already been a member vote on these, or on the kitchen project, right? I'm assuming.
The one we're in now is obviously was voted for approval. The biggie is that'll be next fall, or this, I guess, technically fall of 25.
Got it. And then, so how do you manage the communication leading up to a vote? I mean, because so often it's about getting the information out, the right information, the messaging around that. And I mean, is that pretty typical that you're, a couple of years in advance of education and surveys and that sort of thing?
I don't know that it's pretty typical, but I'd say for this size project, it was warranted. I mean, in 2022, we hosted the US Open, and then shortly thereafter, we were looking at hiring an architect for this large project that Kristen's talking about. And then that had to be started to be communicated. I mean, we are a committee-driven club. That is our governance. And so we're not hiring an architect and not telling the membership about that. We should be informing them about what's going on. So, and then putting a clubhouse project chair in place. And so a message from the club president to say, this is what's happening, and kind of laying the groundwork for that, and trying to show the timeline loosely, but at the same time, not totally committing to it because things change over time. So we're constantly reissuing timelines that maybe fluctuate here and there by a few months, a week, or whatever it might be, but trying to use seasonality to it versus like this is happening on, May 1st. We just with that kind of timeline involved.
Yeah. So it's like, I mean, really every step of the way, right? I mean, it's
Yes.
like, hey, this is happening and then this was going to happen. Is that,
Yes.
yeah, interesting.
So it's taking the project calendar. So like any, project manager that's managing a large scale project has a large, typically, I think a Gantt chart or whatever they may be using to look at the project as a whole, and then overlaying that onto a communications calendar to say, here are the major stakes in the ground of decision making or things that we may know differently. And then how do we kind of keep the story going in between? Because that storytelling is very important. Some of it this time around was, making sure that people don't think we're all sitting in a room and nobody knows who we are, and giving a personality and a face to the committee. So
Right.
we worked with some just 2 to 5 minute videos on each committee member, kind of asking them like, how long have you been a member? What's your most special memory at the club? What are you most interested in with getting involved with this project? So that people started to get to know the committee members working on their behalf that are working on such a large project. But storytelling part is really important.
Yeah, that's brilliant. The messaging part of that is so critical too, because so often you'll have these things and members will go like, oh, well, Ed just wants to do that because his, like his personal interests, right? And so dispelling some of that stuff, or at least addressing that. Can you just talk a little bit about the member involvement? I think it's you both have mentioned having someone who does this work professionally that is working close with your team, Jackie. Has that been difficult to get someone like that? How much do you lean on that person? Like, what does that look like at the country club?
Do you want to go first?
No, Jackie, that has to be you because you're working closely with her. I'm
so the club does have a standing communications subcommittee, which is it reports up to our governance structure. So the communications subcommittee has always been a sounding board. I believe that was instituted around the time of the long range plan, Kristen, 2010-ish.
Yeah.
As a result of that. So the subcommittee, it's a small subcommittee, typically 4 to 6 people. And when we do things like website redesigns, it's a sounding board so that it's not just the staff saying, this is how we believe the website should look and how we know people should be communicated with. It's really from a member perspective, what are your thoughts on it and what experiences do you bring to the table? Because at the end of the day, you are the market audience, back to those kind of personas that you were talking about earlier, of like, we really do need some of them to weigh in on that. So then and the people on that committee have a wide range of experiences. I mean, somebody who has been a member at multiple clubs and sat on various boards and in various positions and involved a little bit in the industry, and somebody else who's in PR, somebody else who works at a marketing firm. So various types of marketing communications backgrounds, which I love because then I get to also learn from them and their experiences. So to me, anybody that I can surround myself with within our governance structure that I'm learning from, all the better. Like that's great, right? Free education there. And then as a result, getting somebody tied into this project in particular from the capital planning perspective, again, I think it's wonderful for our team to see somebody in that role and really advocating for them. I mean, you don't get a golf committee and the director of golf who work on a calendar, like they always have somebody at the table representing them. Mm-hmm. So getting a communications is just parity amongst that. And so it's showing them that communications is just as important. And I think one of the things that Kristen, I find that she's famous for saying, but it's because it impacts me, is that I don't sit in a meeting with people and members we don't leave the room saying, how are we going to communicate that to people? So it's always being talked about, and to get a professional in the room is wonderful.
Yeah. Kristen, how do you do that? Like from a culture perspective? No, I mean, like from a culture perspective, because, a big part of that is having members who really want to be engaged in this way that, and no club is perfect. We know that, but really we are hoping you have people that are thinking about the betterment of the club. and not personal agendas, but so much of that can be just a culture thing. And where did that start? How did that happen?
Yeah, it is a culture thing. And oddly enough, it's a little selfish of me because I think in 2020, when I became GM and went to all those first round of committee meetings, and there were big topics on the agenda, obviously based on COVID. And this is where I was alluding to earlier, has given us a permission to kind of restructure the way that we're approaching everything. And I would definitely put committee communication in that bucket. And selfishly, I didn't want to keep a notebook every single committee meeting that I sat in and then have to message that back to Jackie, then have Jackie ask 14 questions, then have me go to that. I'm not going to play the go-between when I have someone who's, Jackie obviously there's a lot of institutional knowledge there. There's tenure, there are existing relationships and just credibility. And so there was a trust factor with Jackie. But if I were new in a role and I was looking at my communications director and saying, how do I get your attendance into these committee meetings so that when the question comes up, you're on the edge of your seat, like many of us are, and, at the ready to help guide them through what your recommendation would be, then I think I just really evaluate my committees and say, which ones do we spend the most amount of time? And I think for me, it would be something like facilities is a perfect example because there is so much happening at the club all the time. And it doesn't have to be a major capital project, but if there are 4 trucks that are from subcontractors outside of a building that might only be a $500,000 project or a $100,000 project, and people see the orange cones and the trucks coming in and out, it's a social environment. They're going to ask about it and they want to know what's going on. And ultimately it's their dollars, right? It's their club. And so with facilities, inevitably, a lot of these discussions always came back to how can we message this to the membership because they're going to see some activity around that building, or you're out on the golf course giving them an improved, restroom facility. That's stuff that actually you should use to your advantage to get the membership excited about improvements that are happening. And later that illustrates onto the campus conversations how much has been done in the last bunch of years too, when the questions come in about, what the heck has the club done in the last 5 years? You can give a quick go-to, but I think I've oftentimes thought about like, okay, if I were brand new somewhere and they didn't trust me probably a little bit more, once I became the GM, and they didn't trust Jackie because she had been the championship director, back in 2013 for the amateur, and everybody knew her cell phone number at that time, that, those made it a little bit easier. But if I were getting there, I'd evaluate my committees and say, which one is kind of the low hanging fruit so that I could give this person, whoever that communications director is, an opportunity to earn that type of, earn the credibility and the trust of the membership by saying, look what we did as a result, and it worked. And so now all of a sudden you have this group wants to do the same thing with their campaign, and this group. And Jackie and I, every single time we talk to anyone about club communications, it comes back to the advice to the directors, and that's not usually the GMs, it's usually the communications director. And it's slow, and if you have patience, it will happen. And once you hit that tipping point, it's going to roll. And I think that's a lot of what happened at the club, or the country club. But if that answers the question, there's no secret formula, but I think having Jackie in the room to be able to respond to those questions, it's extremely beneficial. It cuts out the middle person, and it also allows her to come, I think, more prepared to a lot of meetings in front of what's on the agenda that is related to, so she can say, here's something to react to. Which I think, generally committee volunteers are moving towards a place of making their time efficient, so they feel like it's value add in their life to give back to the club, but they don't want to do the heavy lifting of taking the curling bonspiel reservations on a clipboard, as a member volunteer. So I think everybody's going to keep that in mind too. I think your volunteer workload is going to be, there's going to be an expectation for the staff to be doing more, I think, as we move forward with getting people's time.
Got it. Were you going to add something, Jack?
I was just going to say, there's also, especially with people newer in the role, there's got to be a little bit of element of trust to try something new and see what happens. And sometimes things stick and sometimes they don't. But one of my best examples of that was I was advocating for some budget dollars so that we could outsource a drone project. We were going to be doing a project out on the course. I wanted a 24-hour kind of project where I could do some videography. We didn't have a drone at the time. This was it was more of a major project going into the open than we would have done just with our own drone. And so we advocated, and we did get the dollars, and it was definitely a test. And one of the best, some of the best things that came back out of that was we had somebody down there that was experienced. They shot for the 24 hours. It was a green complex that was being redone totally within the 24 hours. And then that was it. Like, that was the project.
Wow.
And we needed some storytelling and some narration behind it. We then put that out to the full membership, and the comments that came back, I mean, the golfers are always going to think that's cool, and anybody who's in agronomy is going to think that's cool. The people who came back and who were like, I've never set foot on our golf course. I am a tennis player, but I understood what the project was because of how you put that communication out versus sending me a 2-page written document, was by far the best feedback that we had. And that's what allowed us to move forward. So sometimes it's been trial and error and testing things, but it has to be a little bit of trust. So to Kristen's point, if you've got a new GM or a new communications person that's in the role, you know, trying something different is okay. A lot of things we've tried around here, and some things stick. Like, we went to Instagram. It's a private account for members only, and it really is more to create a sense of community than it is anything else. But I will never forget sitting in those meetings and being told, this is a trial, and if it fails, we are shutting it down. And I said, okay, I promise we'll shut it down. And we didn't look back. I think we've had that since 2017.
And then COVID happened, and we had staff and committee chairs that were at home who were doing like video tips or recipe of the day, or here's your workout of the day, or the famous, this is my all-time favorite, introducing a new tennis committee, and they had everyone in front of their house had a racket and a tennis ball, and they bounced it to the next person on screen, who would then bounce it to the next person. And that's how we introduced a new tennis committee, you know, a rackets committee or whatever, on the member Instagram, and people loved it. There's a reason why I remember it. It's because of the feedback we got on it. But all of a sudden 2020 just gave us permission, and actually that's when the engagement just shot through the roof with a lot of people, I think, in general, right? I would think the world got onto social media more than ever then.
Yeah.
2020 is also what made Squirrel Squad famous. We went public, and so that people could get to know the employee culture a little bit more, and that was going to help us with hiring. And so just, you know, and I get more comments about that around the country than probably anything else that we do.
What was I going to say? Oh, the employee side is a whole other, like, there's capital projects and stuff. But as you were answering about the SMS, Jackie, like, we're always saying that's something we want to throw onto the employees immediately. And sometimes it's the parking notices as they're driving to work, you know? And so I think putting a different kind of, you gotta go into a different mode when you're talking about employee versus members. And so Squirrel Squad truly it was a crisis in the hospitality industry. And I said, flip the switch, Jackie, we're going to go public. It's a recruitment tactic. And the board was 100% behind it. And no questions asked. And it has absolutely helped. I think at a minimum, from a recruitment standpoint, it may not be, hey, I want to apply for a job directly from Instagram, but it's, look at how cool this culture is. I want to see if I can be part of that. And that is what is kind of, people are talking about it, you know, everywhere. I get it a lot too. It's so funny. It's also a cute name.
Yeah.
And I think also back to the personas, it's, you know, knowing the demographics of who is where. Kristen, I hate to put you on the spot, but the average age of an employee?
It was 32 years old last year.
Okay, perfect. So if the average age of an employee is 32, the average age of a new member is around 40, 42. The average age of one of our members is 59, 60. So trying to figure out how you're communicating to those different demographics is different. So, you know, Squirrel Squad really works for our employee recruitment, whereas the member Instagram is really more for showcasing community, but not putting that out publicly, so that it's really just like who your friends are and what's happening socially at the club. It's not really a way to market, you know, upcoming events and whatnot. It's really more what happens.
Yeah. I want to just ask you a couple of questions to digress a little bit into the video stuff that you're doing, because that is, you probably get a lot, Jackie, as well. It's like, how do you do it? How much, you know, what do you, all the specifics around the technicalities. How are you producing your videos? Is it mostly by telephone, using the camera on your phone? Is it, and then how do you gauge what's sort of like acceptable for members? Because I know a lot of times people think they want something really polished, but it doesn't always have to be. It's got to be a certain level. But what's your take on that?
I think for us here, the authenticity is more important than the polish part of the videos. And I think it's really more about getting the information out to people than it is making sure that every angle is correct and the lighting's okay and the sound. And I mean, we do a lot of video production out on the course. We started a segment called Inside the Ropes. I think back before the Open is when that started. And it was really for the grounds team, the agronomy team, to really be able to talk about the work that they were doing on the course, separate from when you talk about golf, you talk about your golf professionals and you talk about lessons and whatnot, but the science behind the grass and everything else that's happening on the course is really important. And people are really interested in it. And when they understand it, or like when aerification comes up. And so we had started this segment with our grounds team, and it happens outside. It's authentic. It's on the course. If it's windy, you might hear the wind, but really learning about what's going on is more important than that kind of the quality of making sure that you block all of that stuff out. Same with, we have another segment that's called our Hard Hat Handbook with our facilities team, to Kristen's earlier point about facilities. And that's taking people behind the scenes as to some of these projects that are going on, whether they're a capital project or not, there's something going on that they can be talking about. So we don't get into really the polished look of videos. So I'd say the club's producing about 250 videos a year.
Wow.
So at that rate, if you think about your budget, that's not where I want to spend money on a budget. So an iPhone works just fine. The mics that you can buy for $15 off of Amazon work just fine. We are an Adobe house here, so we edit within Adobe and put them out. And we use Vimeo when we need to for hosting. And that might be all of $600 a year. So you're not talking about major dollars as long as your team knows how to use the Adobe products.
Yeah,
Then,
very much. Yeah, go ahead.
That's okay. I was just going to say, when we outsource, it's really for a specific reason. It's when I know that either we can't handle whatever the job is, or we need assistance, or we need bigger, better equipment than we really have, and we don't have a reason to purchase it and then be replacing it every year. So we do partner up with a couple of partners locally, and Members First is the first one that I'll call. They do have some videographers that they will work with, and they're local to where we are, so that works out for us. But that gets into a little bit different of a budget, and that's more when I'm looking at capital dollars. And then the other outsourcing is really those capital planning meetings that we were talking about, when we are doing them in person, Zooming, and live streaming and then recording and putting them out. We hire an AV company who's helping us with that, and then gives us the finished video. But they turn it around within 24 hours. There's no editing to it, and then it goes out. So whatever the lighting is in the ballroom, that's the lighting that we're getting. Right. We just take it. It's more informational than.
So it's really, there's very much like a, I don't know if this is the right word, but I think utilitarian. It's like this thing that you just have to do. It's like, let's use it and not obsess over quality. Like, one of my things is just don't let the noise or the light or whatever be a distraction, so people don't, but as long as you're able to cover that, you're in good shape. I do want to just pivot and talk more about, I think, Kristen, where we started earlier, around like once a project has started, right? Like it's been approved and you're moving forward. What has been your approach? And from what you're saying, I'm gathering is probably a combination of things, but how do you handle that? How is it? And what is the members, at the country club, what's the members' interest in need, and how do you address like the right cadence of information and type and that sort of thing?
Yeah, it does go back to the project schedule. And I did say at one conference last year to a group of GMs, as soon as that architect and project manager hand over that master schedule all the way through, what construction will look like, your first reaction should be to get your communications person to get their hands on that and put the same type of calendar or outline together for your communications plan. And all it is, they're milestones. So there's some are moving targets, and you're not going to get everything, on the date necessarily, but it gives you a range of, hey, this is the phase we're in. It's coming to a conclusion around here. Let's give ourselves a 30-day buffer. And it gives you just, again, those milestones to work towards. I think during construction, it's certainly very much the same. You have a construction schedule, so you know the critical milestones. And critical milestones, when you put your member hat on, are what is going to impact me when I come to the club? And so by asking that question, it allows us to say, is the entrance different, during this time period? What's parking going to be like? Like it's as simple as you've just arrived and you're walking through as if you were the member. And if you take that approach, whether you're running an event or if you're actually putting together a communications plan for a capital project, that is the right question to ask yourself fundamentally, because if you're not thinking that way, you're too far in the woods and you're only thinking internally about how we're executing the project, not what the impact is, which is very different. I think the hard hat handbook that Jackie just referenced is an incredible tool. I mean, you've got the high vis vest on and the hard hat with your facilities person walking the members through in a tour way. That's as raw as it gets. And you're in the building with sawdust flying or the masking tape hanging in the background with the plans that the tile guy is following to put in. And there's an authenticity about it that makes the member feel like they're being brought along in the whole process. But it's truly, it's weekly looking and revisiting, like, what do we need to anticipate? What are the questions that are going to come up out of what phase we're in right now, all the way to the finishing touches, like what tree is going into the planting, the planting design, and what does that tree mean? Why was it selected? And so kind of talking through those stories, like Jackie has been so good about referencing from your teaching, Ed, to the country club team over the years, how do we make it about them? It's really that simple, as simple as remembering, never underestimate the size of anyone's ego. So how do you make it about them and what are they experiencing? That's really the key of it. I think Jackie could probably dig into more fundamentals of like how we get those messages across, but I would just say philosophically, it's important for our whole team to be in that mode when you're in the thick of it, because it brings you back to reality and really who you're there for.
Right. That's actually was going to be my next question, second to last question, which is that like your approach to messaging and how you can kind of square up on that, like the message is going to really resonate the most with the member. And, how do you guys handle that, Jackie? And is it just part of the culture at this point? Or is it something like you're always editing for like, hey, how's the reader or how's the viewer going to feel about this when they see it or read it?
I think some of that truly is at this point ingrained in the culture. And I think a lot of our leadership is like dialed into that is what we're trying to get across. I think sometimes my role or the communications team and committee's role is really to dial people back, especially if they're really in the thick of something, whether it's a project or it's something on the golf course or over at rackets, that not every member wants every detail. So let's keep that messaging high level and really think about the average person who's reading it and how it impacts their life. Not, if we're going to do new lighting over in rackets, do they need to know every bit of information that the rackets committee has learned about lighting? Probably not. What they need to know is the timeline that's associated with it, when it's going to impact them on the courts, and that it's going to be better than whatever we have today. Like, keep it simple. I am very much about keeping it simple. I think the other thing that we sometimes underestimate is just how few things people actually do read and how many emails people are getting in their inbox, no matter what stage of their life they're in at this point. People are getting a lot of email. So they're working, they're not working, they have kids, they don't have kids. I don't want to read a 2-page email. And I'm somebody who does try to read everything that comes across my desk so that I'm always learning from it. But you really got to keep that stuff short, or you're going to lose people. And so we're constantly also, the other piece of this is looking at the metrics of, we're putting stuff out. How is it doing? Are we getting read rates? Are we getting open rates, click rates? And where are we seeing kind of the difference in that? A little bit of A/B testing every now and then. We don't do a lot of that. But I do think that, as you get further along with having a communications position, you're able to react to some of that, and knowing the times of day that different types of emails need to go out is also important to getting in front of people.
I would just add something fundamental or tactical, I guess, that Jackie and her team do for the board meetings every month is they put a kind of a wrap up report of that last month's communication statistics, and it features what has been posted, how many clicks. It actually breaks down every single department and committee that's represented on the board and says the percentage of their open rates. And it benchmarks it against what the club world average open rate is. And so people can look at it and be really proud of themselves that they're high performers generally, but whoever is the highest can be really happy that people are opening their newsletters. But I guess that's in the spirit of, how do you educate and build that trust and also have people advocating for you out there, meaning the members? And if the members are armed and equipped with the facts, and that starts at board level and having something as simple as that report, I say simple, Jackie, it probably takes some, it's probably a lot to put together, but it's worth it because that you're showing them a return on investment, if you will. We've invested in not just the department or people, it's not about that, but we've invested in this philosophy and this new culture of communication, and look what's happening as a result. Then they're speaking from a place of knowledge and facts. And so I think in what we do, we can carry those reports over to any committee very easily. In fact, I keep thinking per committee, we should put those stats down
we just started that. So you and I are on the same page per usual.
We worked together a very long time. But that is exactly, those things they're free. We always have, smaller clubs say we're not, we don't have the endless resources. I get that. And we try whenever we're doing things like talking to you, Ed, it's putting that into perspective and saying, okay, what are the free things that you could implement tomorrow that could just get you one step closer to some of the bigger things that we're talking about here. And that one is just, it's fun, it's colorful, it's visually appealing. And I am not a person who reads everything. And I'm at a point in life where I don't even want to click a link if I have to wait for it to get me to the video. And so I'm the extreme case that we oftentimes joke about with Jackie, because I represent a group, obviously. And so I think everything that she was just saying, it resonates.
I think the piece that Kristen just mentioned about the budget, I think there is really important too. Just like it is one of the questions that I typically get asked if I'm going to do something like this with you or speak at a CMAA, BMI, or whatever it might be. But the percentage that gets put into communications is not what people on this call listening may think that it is. You're looking at a 2% kind of overall from the budget, and that's more on labor than it is on any product that we're spending money on. We do a lot with what we already have. I'm also a big fan of making sure that you're using your resources accordingly. So if you have softwares already that do website or that do data mining or whatever it might be, is learning how to use those to the utmost ability. So become the super user of those systems. And if you haven't taken an Excel class lately, take one. It helps a lot. So other than that, I'd say, we're not spending a lot of money on various softwares, and whatever the latest trends might be, we're doing a lot with a little amount of budget.
All right. I've held you longer than I should, than I promised you, but I do have one question for people who are listening, and in the spirit of kind of what you're saying before, Kristen, what's the first step? If you're at a club right now and maybe you're a one-person membership director, or you're even someone, in leadership at the club who's listening, and this resonates with them, what are the first couple of things that they can do to start to really be more proactive in their communications, and a little bit more strategic as it relates to how they're doing it today?
I'll go first because Jackie's will be a better finale, I'm sure, for her response. But I think if I were new somewhere tomorrow and I said, I'd love to see this at this club over the next couple of years, see if we could implement something, I would start like we do as an industry oftentimes. I would start collecting examples from other clubs and starting to show kind of whoever the leadership is that I work closest with, the examples of what has been done, but also start talking to the clubs that have been really successful with these communications plans, where you have like our board members or our membership in general would be our biggest cheerleaders to talk to their friends at other clubs and say, hey, look what the country club did. Our annual report, which we didn't even touch on in this entire podcast, but I know Jackie skimmed over it at one point. When we went to a visual instead of the traditional textbook, literally a book of just text in black and white, 5x7, it was dry. to this, the actual booklet that has colors and stats and infographics and all those fun things, pie charts. That was a game changer to hear feedback. I mean, for members who've been a member at the club for 50 years that said, I had no idea. I had no idea about the scope, the size of the operation. This is incredible. Now, the follow-up was, do you mind if I share it with my club in so-and-so in Florida at such and such? We put out an etiquette video, and we'll do that again this year. And this time we're putting the committee chairs in front of it instead of staff. And the number of people that would call and say, do you mind if is there a chance that you could send me a link that isn't secure so that I can share that with my club, at my seasonal club in Maine? Absolutely. We're willing to share that. I think everyone in this industry is in a position to gather information because we're lucky that we share it with each other, but that is a very first step. And members don't want to hear from other GMs. They don't want to hear from other communications directors. They want to listen to Ed Heil's podcast and they want to hear from each other. And so that is, I think, the first step in just kind of opening the eyes to any club that's not even close to this phase. I think for the ones that are at that mid-level, that's probably the more common, they're starting to get there. It will happen. And I would just say, if you're a GM, be willing to experiment on the employee side before you're ready to roll it out to your membership, because I do think that it gives you a chance to test it. And it also gives you something to show, because I always like to show something fun to our board or give them good news or something. But you could integrate it that way and see if there's any response. And, again, as a GM, I'd find out who in my membership does what you do and what Jackie does professionally, and just say, hey, do you mind if I have a little brainstorming session with you, and figure out who they're connected to in your leadership, so that you can, again, build that coalition to kind of get something off the ground if you really feel that strongly about it. But the success stories are going to be what to lean on.
Got it. What do you think, Jack?
She went philosophical, so I'll go tactical. I would say that if there is somebody on your team already that you feel like is ready for a new challenge, or is just really ingrained in the club culture and is looking for something like this to do, you can start as a part-time role. It doesn't have to be a full-time role. Just start somewhere. And I think one of the easiest things to start doing is to take stock of how many emails your club, all your professionals, all your departments, how many emails are the club sending out to the membership that are hitting their inboxes. If that number is more than 4 a month, you need to make sure you're taking a look at, what is your one voice policy? Do you have a voice of your club that is sending out those emails? Because one of the things that I always tell our team, as well as the interns that come through here when I talk about our role in the club, is that everybody in this club is a professional at something, right? So we have a golf professional, we have a rackets professional, a curling professional, all of the various professionals. They're culinary professional. Their job is not to be necessarily a professional writer, professional photographer, professional communicator, putting those things out grammatically correct. So we'll do some ghostwriting for them. We do collaborations with them. We help make their operation look better. And so if you have somebody on your team that could start there, even that, your members are going to likely give you good feedback right off the bat if you've now got a coordinated approach amongst the various emails and departments that are going out, and a voice that sounds like, oh, I'm getting that. I know that's from my club. Oh, it looks like it's from my club. And start there. I mean, anybody can use Canva. Anybody can use ChatGPT. It's not the same as having a coordinated approach from your club.
Yeah, awesome. I love it. Hey, thanks to both of you for all of your time today. I think I committed, I was saying maybe like a half hour, 40 minutes, well past that, but
you got two talkers on the phone, so that was your first mistake.
What's that?
So that's not you. That's not on you.
I
Your
love
guests.
So thanks so much. And I look forward to more conversations in the future. And thank you for listening. If you find episodes like this helpful, be sure to share it and subscribe on whatever podcast platform you're using. Until next time, keep crushing your club marketing.